Okay, so that was a quick summary of France and Germany. We're going to go on to our next guest. That's David Engels, professor at the ICES in the Vendée in France and senior research fellow at the MCC here in Brussels. Hello, David. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Great. Now we're talking about Macron's gamble. What's your take on that?
Well, from a certain point of view, his movement is quite shrewd, and it's not as desperate as it may seem yesterday evening. To the contrary, in fact, he is playing on the fact that either way. He wins, because if he managed now to use the next 3 weeks in order to build up a credible alternative to Le Pen, if he manages exactly as, by the way, the Greens and the lefts managed in the Netherlands to build up a momentum against the possibility of a right-wing takeover, then of course he will have a new parliamentary majority and remain more or less safely in power and be able to present the new Olympic Games as Olympic Games of hope and whatever. But if Le Pen wins, then of course Le Pen has to face two major issues. On the one hand, the Rassemblement National is not very well prepared to exert government. They need manpower, they need professionality, they need people knowing really their stuff, and that is, of course, a huge issue for her. And the other problem, which is even worse, is that, of course, in case of a cohabitation, Le Pen will have to face massive sabotage and resistance from all parts. She will have a president that is that will manage to find a new personality and a new self-representation in his internal resistance to Marine Le Pen. All the institutions will be against her. The European Union will be against her. So we might face massive chaos in France, especially during, of course, the Olympic Games, which is a moment when everyone will be looking at France and will be seeing that we will have demonstration and massive chaos every day. And I think that is precisely what also Macron wants, because then, after a certain time, if this may lead to a certain inner deconstruction of the Rassemblement National, and then, for example, if Macron also steps down as president or calls in new elections, then he might indeed be able not only to build then a new majority, but perhaps even to become president once more. So we shouldn't see this situation as being just a sign of Macron's defeat. I think that the real battle is starting, and it can become very nasty, not only for France, but for the entirety of Europe. Because if France is in a crisis, the rest of Europe will be too.
That's fascinating. I'm going to be putting those points to Gabriel here in the studio. But before I do, David, 2 words, please, on the German election results.
Yeah, well, of course, if we compare the situation of the AfD to what happened in 2019, it is undeniable that we have an increase, and that the AfD definitely has become a key player in German politics, and that the AfD will stay there. So that is obviously, from the AfD's point of view, certainly a success. But, and there's always a but, of course, we see that already that only some months ago the AfD was at more than 20%. Now they lost considerably, and what they lost is not only a couple of percent, but I think that some months ago there was a larger majority also of what is called in Germany a Bürgerlich. That is that kind of centrist people that are not extremists, but that want simply to protect their own little enterprise, their state, their interests, and so forth. And these people started to flock to the AfD some months ago. And I think this movement has partly been stopped. The AfD has been reduced during these last weeks because of all the scandals that happened to her core electorships. So in my view, at least, they didn't manage really to go beyond the people who would have voted AfD whatever may have happened. And I think that is, of course, very different from the success they may have imagined, and which they may have also arrived at still some months ago. But of course, there is this large media barrage against the AfD. We know that for a long time. There are also their inner conflicts. There's this ideological uncertainty where they really want to go to, and their incredible talent, you have to say, to always sabotage themselves during the last weeks. And so I think that that is one problem for the AfD. But the other is it goes even further, because still some weeks ago, before the scandal around Maximilian Krah, there would have been this possibility of the AfD becoming and staying a part of the winning impetus of right-wing parties such as Le Pen's party, such as Madame Meloni's party, such as still is the case also with Peace, even though they lost some votes, the Austrians and so forth. But now, because of their ejection from the ID group, and the fact that now they will probably have to form some form of hooligan coalition with some very minor parties in the
Hooligan
Balkans.
coalition.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
an
In
interesting
the
word.
Balkans, that may, of course, in the long run, been a problem for their own credibility towards the German voter, because the German voter, if he sees that the AfD is in a strong and functioning coalition with someone like the Rassemblement National, perhaps after a fusion with the ECR or collaboration with the ECR, with Meloni, perhaps with Orban and others, this might have contributed to a de-diabolization of the AfD, and may have also convinced many Germans that in the end this is not a neo-Nazi party. But with what is happening now, this will become more difficult.
Okay, David, before we let you go, I know that you've analysed Hungary as well. Can you give us a quick summary as to what's happening in Budapest, please?
Yeah, well, perhaps just the fact to notice what has remained partly unnoticed during these last weeks, that Orban's power is slowly weakening. I think that nobody would have expected that his newcomer enemy, Peter Magyar, is now at 30% of the vote. So that is, of course, absolutely incredible. Orban has significantly lost. He's still the strongest party, of course, obviously, and also his adversary is not a left-wing opponent, but rather comes also from a conservative environment. But it shows what I've feared for many months now, that is the fragility also of the system Orban. And so we saw that already in Poland some month ago. Peace, which seemed to be definitely on the controls of the Polish institutions and the political apparatus, was ejected and was replaced in a very brutal way by Donald Tusk, who is now trying whatever he can to realign the Polish state with the European mainstream, and who is very successful in that, and who even managed to get confirmed in that also during the European elections. So what is happening now in Hungary may be a sign that in the not perhaps in the short term, but at least in the middle term or long term, Hungary could go the same way if Orban does not really manage to find a solution to this inner opposition. And so we may have a situation in some years that some have announced, that I have to confess I also started to see on the horizon these last years, of a form of reversal of the political situation in Europe, where the East, which was always considered as being more identitary, more traditionalist, more conservative, may rather move to the West, to the left, I'm sorry, whereas the West of the European continent, with old countries, old EU member states like Italy, like perhaps France, like the Netherlands, may move rather to the right side. So that this may be some form of turning of the tide, not in the immediate, of course, but in the long run. So something we need also to monitor very closely.
David, that's great. Thanks for joining us with those interesting points. Gabriel.